Back up. Back up. How the hell is this not working? One freaking shot. No, hey. Get off me. Get. Now.
Whew. My God, this thing freaking works. I'll be saving you for later. So yeah. How you guys doing? And today we're going to be comparing two games. And I know that this is possibly going to cause a lot of controversy, and I know there's nostalgia, backed up behind it. I don't really care. What I want to do is just want to compare these two games unbiasedly and with a simple criteria. And those games, of course, are Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2, the remake. Yeah, so let's just get to it. The criteria are story, lasting appeal, sound, visual presentation, and of course, gameplay. So yeah, this is going to be a tough one. But yeah, let's get to it. Which RE2 is the better game? Well, let's find out. Now first up, story. Now here, the story is relatively the same in both games. So we cannot really see it, as like beat by beat and also details. But we can see how it's structured and pretty much how it's paced. Well, the original provides the player with two amazing ways to enjoy the game, which is technically 4 playthroughs. If you aren't familiar, I'll be brief. Both ways start the game off with Leon meeting Claire, and they go for a ride to the police station. After a brief encounter with zombies, they get into a car accident, and depending on which way the car spins, each character will start on opposite sides of the fiery wreckage, creating 2 alternate timelines, Leon A, Claire B, and of course, Claire A, Leon B. Besides the notable change, both characters still end up meeting the same playable sidekick character they would in their respective campaigns. Leon meets Ada, and Claire meets Sherry. So that is one consistent thing. But besides that, there are cool little tidbits here and there that do change from playthrough to playthrough. For example, something that happens in Claire's story would affect something that would make sense in Leon's story when he crosses the same area. It creates an incredibly cool duality that makes the player kind of stop and remember their previous playthrough with fondness. Not to mention, besides playing through the mansion with all new puzzles and scenario-specific bosses, plot points also change drastically, creating a need to play through all the different scenarios to see all the what-ifs the game has to offer, creating an incredible and unforgettable experience. And trust me, the original sure is that. And now, let's move on to the remake, and let's see what it did with this crazy, notion of having 2 intertwining stories happening at the same time. And, well, not much. While in the remake, there are moments where the player can notice something being out of place or a window being smashed from the actions of the previous character. Every single scenario hit all the same beats. They have all the same boss fights with Birkin, except for one that is exclusive to Claire. Mr. X appears in every single playthrough, which is odd since he was exclusive to the B scenario in the original game. All of which makes even less sense each time you see it. Not to mention, even the character-specific moments, whether you played in their scenario A or B incarnation, don't seem to change at all, which honestly is a huge missed opportunity because I would have loved to see how crazier they could have gotten with the intertwining stories. But yeah, having said all that negative stuff, the remake does some good things here, and pretty much attempts to become the official canon story in the timeline. In a weird way, it feels like a greatest hits remix of all the original scenarios. The remake ultimately chooses plot points that make the most sense in the overall lore of Resident Evil, and crafts them into a coherent, familiar story, albeit with some plot holes. But besides that, the remake does make some notable changes to certain elements, and even characters. And to be honest, I preferred some of them, like the reimagining of Robert Kendo, as well as displaying Chief Irons as a much more sick individual outright, instead of it being discovered mainly through notes. It definitely made me feel a wider range of emotions than the original did. As a whole, the remake plot is still great in its own right. But sadly, to make matters even worse, the story in the remake doesn't seem to stand by itself, and in some areas, expects the player to already know about this series. I mean, for example, what's up with Chris's note you see in the STARS office? Oh, that's a reference to Code Veronica. Did you play that yet? It's a great Easter egg for someone like me, but for a newcomer, it makes little sense and kind of anticlimactic, especially since he is the main reason why Claire is in Raccoon City in the first place. I know it exists in the original as well, but that was a teaser for what's to come. Here it's just, I don't know, it just could have been more fleshed out. they may be nitpicking, but sadly there's a lot of moments like that in this game. I mean, for example, look at Mr. X and how they introduce him in the original game. Now, let's look at how he's introduced in the remake. Now, this is a cool scene, and scares the player half to death, especially if you play the original. But unlike the original, you are still left with, who is he? How did he get here? What's his main goal? In the originals, it's pretty self-explanatory. He was dropped off with the sole purpose to act as a weapon. Who dropped him off? That's the real mystery, but you can easily guess that. Instead, in the remake, you figure this out by reading Ben's note, which, mind you, is only in Leon's campaign. So if you play Claire first like I did, or miss the file completely, his purpose literally becomes lost. Alright, so in conclusion, while I do love the remake's changes, you just can't beat the variety and, overall structure of the originals. So yeah, point goes to the original. Alright, this is a big one in the Resident Evil series, lasting appeal, or here, replayability. Well, to be honest, they both got generally the same amount of things at face value. Both games, as mentioned before, have 4 total scenarios each, and some bonus modes. The main difference between the two is that unlocking these bonus modes is far more lax in the remake than in the original. For example, in order to unlock the 4th survivor mode in the original, you must play through scenario A and B with either character after one another and achieve an A rank in at least one, which is essentially beating the game in under 3 hours, plus other stipulations like no health sprays and how many times you save. While in the remake, it's the same thing, beat scenario A and B, but this time, rank does not matter, making it far easier. Oh, and it gets worse with Tofu Survivor. In the remake, to unlock Tofu, all you have to do is beat the 4th survivor mode. That's it. Sounds simple enough, huh? Well, in order to play as Tofu in the original, first you need to play the game on normal, make sure to unlock Hunk by playing 2 scenarios, and then beating the opposite scenarios, and then after that beating another 2 scenarios, ultimately making the final run a total of 6 playthroughs through the police station. And I do believe that you must achieve an A rank in all of them. This may vary from version to version, but to be honest, any way you slice it, that is a hell of a lot to do. For a pro, it's more time consuming than anything. But for a casual gamer, this is especially difficult since there is no in-game timer like there is in the remake. So, while the two seem to have the same amount of content, the original is far more grind heavy and puts the player through their paces to unlock everything. And in hindsight, that should definitely put the original ahead, right? Well, again, despite all of that, the remake also includes other extra modes, specifically Ghost Survivors, which puts the player in the shoes of 4 new playable characters, each campaign lasting about the same length as the 4th survivor mode, but with much more variety since each playable character has a unique story and path to traverse. So now, while it's certainly not grind-inducing like the original, the remake clearly has more content, right? Well, I do already hear some people typing out comments like, you forgot Extreme Battle Mode, or Ghost Survivors should count because it's DLC. Well, let me counter that with this. You are correct, I forgot to mention Extreme Battle Mode. But even if I did, this is still going to the remake. Why? Well, 1. Extreme Battle Mode is not present in all versions of RE2, the original non-DualShock version and the N64 to be specific. 2. Since it wasn't in the original, it can also be seen as DLC, in the same vein as Ghost Survivors. Extreme Battle Mode was not given to us until future releases, which the remake already has a leg up on because the DLC was given to us for free, with no additional purchase. And last but not least, 3. The Battle Mode is actually substituted in the remake, with an additional 4 Tofu characters. After you beat Tofu Survivor, you unlock 2 new characters, and if you beat it again with one of those characters, you unlock 2 more, essentially giving you 4 extra characters just like Extreme Battle Mode. Oh, and before I forget, the remake also has more unlockable infinite ammo weapons than the original. Alright, with all that said and done, it's gotta go to the remake. I mean, yes, it'll probably take you longer to unlock everything on the original side, but there's much more unique and worthwhile content in the remake, and lasting appeal doesn't always just count to time. Even though it would take you a lot longer to unlock all the special little intricates and the stupid hats and goes for. Regardless, point goes to the remake. Next up, sound. The soundscape and monsters are a real treat in the new game. From the shrieks of the lickers as they readied their attack, to the voice acting that is obviously much better than the original. The Foley artist and voice actors knocked it out of the park here. Which brings me to the zombies. One of the things you are going to hear the most in this game are the zombies. In the original, whenever you enter a room, you definitely know when a zombie is close, especially when you hear, which at least puts me personally on high alert. But in the remake, the shrieks are far more terrifying to listen to. And thanks to the 3D audio, I immediately look in that direction. The audio design is masterful here, giving everything a unique sound cue that immediately has the player on edge. But the original wins. Well, that took the wind out of the remake sails. I mean, the new one does a great job with every gun pop, dog bark, and interaction with the environment, giving the player a great sense of immersion. But as hauntingly immersive the halls of the game are, they do feel rather empty, without any music. And I'm not saying that all the new songs are bad. No, you actually need to hear the songs to actually judge them if they were bad or not. What I mean by that is that for some reason all the songs in the remake eventually just stop playing. Either that, or they honestly just get drowned out amongst all the other sound effects. I mean, listen to them on YouTube. They are great recreations of the original songs, but they're way too quiet and somber, and lack the punch that the originals had. For example, here's the classic music of the main hall in the original. Now, here's the same area in the game, but in the remake. Now, in certain cases, silence definitely can heighten the tension, but in the original's case, the soundtrack achieves that and more, not only providing tension, but giving every area an iconic theme. Not to mention, all the original RE2 sound effects and monster noises were immersive even back in 1998, and are just as great now in today's day and age. So, as much as I do love the 3D binaural implementation in the remake, where you can actually hear Mr. X coming from any direction, you actually know what direction he's coming from, the soundtrack is just better in the original, and it just wins by a landslide in that case. I mean, honestly, thank God I got the deluxe edition because you can actually listen to the original soundtrack, which just works perfectly in this. And also, with the deluxe edition, you can actually hear this.
Resident Evil 2.
Where in the remake stock sound mode, you get this. So yeah, point goes to the original, because the soundtrack is from the original. Next category, visual presentation. Now, in the original, there really are no real dark hallways. Everything is pretty lit up, all things considered, and the design of each frame was wonderfully crafted. Every setting is iconic in its look and design. From the police station to the sewers, everything is made to showcase a feeling of dismay and mystery that makes the player equally dread and be curious as to what lies behind the doors in front of them. It's a well-modeled world, and everything from the characters to the pre-rendered backgrounds is amazing to look at, despite its dated graphic fidelity. The artistic integrity shines through no matter what system you play this on. So now let's talk about the remake. Well, it takes what made the original so great. It not only brings it to the new HD world of graphics, but alters it enough to make it its own realized world. For starters, let's talk about the lighting. There is no pre-rendered artificial darkness here. This is true darkness. That, like in real life, can only be cut through by a source of light. Everything can be lit up with your flashlight, and when you observe the area around you, you can see that every detail was painstakingly created just as the original was. And even more so here. Case in point, everything in the remake is disgusting. From the dilapidated setting, to the body horror BOWs, and of course the gratuitous amounts of gore. You definitely feel like you need to take a shower after you play this game. I mean, I rarely ever check out the models in the extra modes in other games, but here I was almost inclined to. I mean, look at that craftsmanship. Sure, this may seem like a cheat because the original game did not have the technology, but for its time, RE2 was an achievement. But the remake clearly goes above and beyond to make everything stand out even more than it had to, and even raise the bar for gore in games at the time of its release. which is honestly shocking, seeing as how games have been pretty brutal for the past couple decades. Make no mistake, this was hard to do, and it's a very close call, but I'm giving it to the remake because they were able to just make it that much better. They were able to take something perfect and improve upon it. So yeah, point goes to the remake. And now, finally, gameplay. This is the big one, folks, and honestly, I had to save the best for last. With games like Resident Evil 5 and 6, the third-person perspective has become an unsuitable way to portray horror in the RE series. What the remake needed to do was either go back to basics or follow more what made RE4 so great. Happily, we got both. And something new entirely. Puzzles are back and in full force compared to the ones in RE7, along with item management, which honestly feels similar to the originals, but far more strategic this time around, especially if you play on hardcore. Yes, you can upgrade your item capacity all the way up to 20 slots. But on hardcore, you're going to have to make do with only 14, if you are able to find all the extra hip pouches, which one of them is near the end anyway, so more like 12 the whole game. Regardless of either mode you choose, it becomes a minigame of when and where to carry certain items, along with which weapons are the most effective against the enemies on your current path. Speaking of which, the enemies. They are far more aggressive and harder to take down than any previous Resident Evil game before. I mean, every enemy by itself is an actual viable threat. You can essentially put a whole clip into a single zombie, and they will still be up and kicking, making it much more important to judge where your shots land, as well as timing your shots correctly in case the zombie decides to sway in the other direction, making you waste a bullet or two. Also, if they hit the ground, it's far more difficult to tell if they're truly down for the count or not. Unlike the original's pool of blood, the best strategy is to either shoot them till they hit the ground, and then wail on them with a knife. Or you can forego all of that by just simply aiming for their legs, just to stun them. But note, if you have to go through this area again, they will still be there, and possibly hiding behind a corner next time to latch onto you for a cheap bite. This alone creates an all-new strategy when it comes to backtracking and replays. Add on top the slightly sluggish movement speed, the lightning quick attacks from every enemy spanning from dogs to lickers, and the equal parts terrifying and aggravating Mr. X, and well, you have the making of a police station from hell. Connected to a sewer and a laboratory, of course. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it brings a level of difficulty that translates very well into tension, and with that tension, the game begins to feel scary, stressful, and most important of all, fun. But you know what other game had the tension down to a T? The original. In the original, everything was out to get you, whether it be the enemies out for blood, the item management, the puzzles, they were all designed to break your brain. And even the clock, especially at the end. Regardless, the game was designed to push the player to their limits, fail, then entice them to get back up and try again, this time with new knowledge to help them succeed, as well as making their successive attempts much quicker, which gives the player a terrific experience of trial and error. On top of that, ammo is far more scarce than in the remake. But this is counteracted by the fact that not every enemy requires luck or 5 to 10 headshots to take down. But of course, most notable of all was the tank controls. Giving the player a slight disadvantage in movement made every obstacle in your way increase tenfold, making for a much more tense experience, and in the end, a much more gratifying one. Some of the scares hinged on these controls, and it was a lot better for it. But again, looking at it from the perspective of newer games, what if we took away the tank controls? Well, thankfully, we can, with the N64 version, so yeah. Let's do this. And I have to be honest here. While the argument can be made that tank controls have not aged well at all, without them, the original RE2 becomes a piece of cake. Sure, it's a bit wonky at first readjusting the direction when the camera changes, but once you get the hang of it, avoiding enemies becomes very easy. Kind of destroying most of the tension, which in turn loses a huge part of what made the original so great. And look, don't get me wrong, I love the fixed camera angle gameplay of the original. It's extremely cinematic and allowed the developer to fine-tune some moments to their advantage, allowing for some optimal scares and unforgettable gameplay moments. But they have become dated, and to be completely honest, tank controls, I really don't see them doing well in today's day and age. Which by all means, if someone wants to prove me wrong, please do so, I will buy your game in a heartbeat. But what truly shines here is the fact that Capcom was able to capture the same lightning as before, but in a different bottle. The third-person movement and action is very different from the tank controls of yesteryear, but the fact that this game made me feel as helpless and scared in the same way the original did, even with modern and much more precise control, just speaks volumes to how good the game mechanics were utilized here. Whether it be breaking away from a zombie at the last minute thanks to a bit of item management, or attempting to sneak by a licker even though Mr. X is right behind you preparing a lunge attack, or even trying to dodge an onslaught of zombie dogs with no ammo or health items. This game feels like a true Resident Evil title, and in many ways, a culmination of everything that came before it. So yeah, point goes to the remake, which makes the overall winner Resident Evil 2, the remake. Well, that's the video. And yeah, some of you hate me. I can definitely feel it. But, look, the purpose of this video is not to, decide between the two. Both games are fantastic in their own right. I mean, whether, you're a person, you're stubborn, you hate freaking tank controls. I get it. Well, there's a new one right here waiting for you this whole freaking time. And also, if, you don't like the new style, well, guess what? This one's been waiting for you for the last 2 decades. Play it. It's fantastic. And honestly, I can't choose between the two because they're both one and the same. Not because this one's a remake and it's the same story, but they both have their strengths, they both have their very minor weaknesses, and whether it be classic or contemporary, they are pretty much some of the best survival horror games, bar none. And yeah, but yeah, buy both games. I mean, whether it be, on the PS4, PC, or the Xbox One for the remake, or, the GameCube, Dreamcast, PS1, N64, I was about to say Gamescom, do not do that. The Gamecom version sucks. And yeah, it should burn with the rest of Raccoon City. But, yeah. I think that's pretty much it. Capcom. I want to talk to you guys. You guys kind of lost me there for a bit, like in the mid-2000s, but you got me back. And honestly, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but keep going. You're doing great. And I cannot wait for, Resident Evil 8, and of course, the inevitable Resident Evil 3 remake. I mean, it's going to happen, regardless. But, yeah. Buy them all. Resident Evil series is fantastic, and yes, while there are some shitty ones, let's just hope that those are now in the past. And no bad ones come in the future, because the fact that they can take this and still make a pretty damn good freaking game out of it. Not pretty damn good, amazing game out of it. It just speaks volumes to how great Capcom is. And, well, I cannot wait. So yeah, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And before I forget, I actually want to save my progress here because I do not want to redo all of this. So yeah. Crap, I got jammed. These things are fickle. Yeah. And that's pretty much it.